Hey, good afternoon to you. It's now 3:06 News Talk 105.9 WMAL, where we're making sense of the news. Coming up this hour from the London Center for Policy Research, Tony Shaffer will join us. We'll talk to him about Tulsi Gabbard joining the Trump administration officially, get his reaction to that. At 4:30, you know him from O'Connor and Company, Larry O'Connor, right here on this program. We'll talk to him about his brand new book, going after the disgraceful legacy media. It's an excellent book. Larry's an excellent guy. Can't wait to talk to him. Nikki Neely will be here at 5 o'clock from Parents Defending Education. We'll talk about Linda McMahon en route to becoming Secretary of Education. And Gabriella Hoffman will be with us at 5:30 from the Independent Women's Forum on a very important conversation. Do you know how difficult it is to have backyard chickens in Northern Virginia? Backyard chickens, just to get some eggs that aren't destroyed by bird flu? We'll talk to Gabriella about that. And we'll talk to you at 888-630-9625, 888-630-WMAL. Just moments ago, President Trump announcing reciprocal tariffs against countries who charge extra fees against the United States of America, against our workers, against our products. The president says no more with this unfair arrangement.
And on trade, I have decided for purposes of fairness that I will charge a reciprocal tariff, meaning whatever countries charge the United States of America, we will charge them. No more, no less. In other words, they charge us a tax or tariff, and we charge them the exact same tax or tariff.
Seems
Very
fair.
Simple. Nobody knows what that number is unless you go by the individual country. You can see what it is if you go to the individual country and you look at what they're charging us. In almost all cases, they're charging us vastly more than we charge them, but those days are over.
We're getting a bad deal, President Trump says, and who could be opposed to this particular arrangement? If you have a country imposing tariffs on our products, it only stands to reason that we would respond in kind. The goal, of course, is to bring those tariffs down to settle on both sides, get rid of them so that the United States can export products without being artificially suppressed by these other countries dropping tariffs on them, and get rid of those non-tariff trade barriers, too, while we're at it. Canada does this to our dairy products. They limit the amount of dairy products that can be purchased from the United States in Canada on purpose. Let's get rid of that. Let's just let the free market work, don't you think? President Trump announcing reciprocal tariffs today. President Trump is also in the midst of, as we speak, answering questions in the Oval Office. He's doing another one of these press briefings. Do you want to dip in? You want to hear what he's saying? Here he is. Take a listen.
From Ukraine and from the United States.
Do you want to have Russia back to the G7, sir?
I'd love to have them back. I think it was a mistake to throw them out. Look, it's not a question of liking Russia or not liking Russia. It was the G8. And I said, what are you doing? You guys, all you talk about is Russia, and they should be sitting at the table. I think Putin would love to be back. Obama and a couple of other people made a mistake, and they got Russia out. It's very possible that if that was the G8, you wouldn't have had the problem with Ukraine. And if I was president, you definitely wouldn't have had the problem with Ukraine. Russia would have never attacked Ukraine. But you ask a very good question, the G8. It used to be the G8, and then these people threw them out. And I was arguing with Trudeau and with numerous of the people. Actually, Prime Minister Abe, a great man from Japan, agreed with me 100%, and some of the others did too. But I got there, it was the G7, as you know. They had already been terminated. I think it would have been very helpful, and it still would be helpful to have Russia be a part of that mix. And I think if they were, I don't think you would have had the problem that you have right now.
Russia is part of the G20. They kicked them out, of course, because they illegally annexed Crimea. I mean, how would you have responded if Russia invaded or took over?
They took Crimea during Obama. 2014. They took, well, now they're looking to take the whole thing. Then they took a big chunk of land and people, as you know, during Bush. And now they're trying to take the whole thing during Biden. You know, the only one that didn't give them anything is Trump. They never took anything with Trump.
Look, President Trump trying to work his way towards a deal here with Russia. That's the goal. And saying, look, we've got to figure out a way to bring about a peace. His concern is that, first of all, we have American resources that are constantly going out the door. But probably actually even above that is the loss of human life. He's looking at this going, we've got over 1 million casualties in that region, and all we're doing is sustaining that. We can't allow that to happen. He wants to bring this human catastrophe to an end.
But Crimea was Obama, and then Bush gave him a lot, you remember. And then, in fact, it's a sort of a standard little phrase, and Biden's giving him everything because this is a war that shouldn't have been had. And the only one that didn't give him anything is Trump. It's just the way it is.
What's the message from Wall Street about these tariffs? So there's been some nervousness on Wall Street about the impact.
So. I mean, there hasn't been very much, and I think it's going to make the United States stronger, and in many ways it could make other countries stronger too. You know, other countries want to have a strong United States. They want to have a strong America, and I think it's going to make us very, very strong, much stronger. And we have a lot of work we're doing.
Yeah, I don't know what this guy's talking about.
Already, I've authorized some contracts.
You know, the market is up right now, 350 points. The Dow is up right now. This idea that Wall Street is recoiling at the announcement of reciprocal tariffs, not so.
When things settle down, I'm going to meet with China, and I'm going to meet with Russia in particular, those two, and I'm going to say there's no reason for us to be spending almost $1 trillion on military. There's no reason for you to be spending $400 billion. China's going to be at 400 billion. We're at $1 trillion. We're going to be at close to $1 trillion. And I'm going to say, we can settle this on, we can spend this on other things. We don't have to spend this on military because, and I'm going to be meeting with China. You know, we were trying to de-escalate nuclear, and I was in a position where Russia had agreed and China had agreed we were going to start, and then we had a rigged election, so that never took place. But this one was too big to rig. We won by so much that it was too big to rig.
You want to do the China meeting in the United States, or would you travel to China for that?
For what?
A China meeting. Would you do that here or
I
there?
tell people all the time, you know, the question is who's going to have the first meeting, where are you going to, I say this to Putin, to President Xi, I say to everybody, never bothered me, you know, I'm willing to say I'll go first. It doesn't matter. It's the end result that counts. So it doesn't make any difference.
When do you want to have a conversation about global defense spending, you, China,
Well, I'd
Russia?
like to have that, as soon as things settle down, I'm going to have that conference, primarily with China and Russia, because those are the two that really are out there. And we're going to have them spend a lot less money, and we're going to spend a lot less money. And I know they're going to do it. They agreed to it. We were talking about denuclearizing, and President Putin and I agreed that we were going to do it in a very big way. There's no reason for us to be building brand new nuclear weapons. We already have so many you could.
You know, I take this is a big
destroy the
deal.
world
This is
50
a
times
huge
over,
message for him.
100
How many
times
times has he
over.
talked about this? He
And
is
here we are building
deeply
new
scared
nuclear
about the
weapons, and they're
situation with
building
nuclear weapons
and
worldwide.
China's building nuclear weapons, and China's trying to catch up because, you know, they're very substantially behind, but within 5 or 6 years they'll be even. And we're all spending a lot of money that we could be spending on other things that are actually, hopefully, much more productive. Hopefully, there'll never be a time when we need those weapons. If there's ever a time when we need nuclear weapons, like the kind of weapons that we're building and that Russia has and that China has to a lesser extent, but will have, that's going to be a very sad day. That's going to be probably oblivion.
Do you see that as separate conversations, or do you see one giant summit with you, Xi Jinping, and Vladimir Putin?
Yeah, I could see that. Let things calm down a little bit. You know, when I left, we had no Middle East problem. We had no Russia going into Ukraine. They never would have done it. Putin never would have done it. And I came back, and we got like the whole world is blowing up.
The media's going to go crazy over
So,
that. A mega summit
when
with
we
both
straighten
Xi
it all
and
out,
Putin.
then I want to have one of the first meetings I want to have is with President Xi of China, President Putin of Russia, and I want to say, let's cut our military budget in half. And we can do that. And I think we'll be able to do it.
If Elon Musk identifies wasteful spending in the Defense Department, defense contractors and the like, are you willing to go after that spending
Yes.
as well? That's
We have to go waste, fraud, and
Yeah.
abuse. Yeah, and we're doing that.
Could we, you know, I'm just
Silly
wondering about
question.
your conversations on defense spending. Would you want to do that as a trilateral, or would you use the existing body that also already includes China and Russia, the G20?
I know, it's the people. It's President Putin, President Xi. I don't need bodies. I don't need anything. It's people. It's all about people. It's about relationship and people. And, you know, I've had a good relationship with President Putin. I've had a good relationship with President Xi. It's about people. And I think when things straighten out, which I hope will be in the not too distant future, the meeting I want to have first is a meeting with China and a meeting with Russia on slowing down, stopping, and reducing nuclear weapons in particular, and also on not having to spend the kind of money we're all spending on weapons, military weapons generally.
I think my question is, would you have those meetings separately with each of those leaders, or would you try to bring them all together?
Both. You start off separately, and that's what was happening. I was dealing with President Putin. We had really an understanding where we were going to denuclearize. What a beautiful term that is, right? Denuclearize. What a great thing if we could do that. And we were going to, he really liked the idea, and so did I. And we had then called China, and China was very open to it. And then COVID hit, and then we had a rigged election. But now there was no rigged election. Now we have an election that was too big to rig. That's what my whole theme was, too big to rig. And they tried, but they didn't pull it off.
Sir, as part of the reciprocal tariffs, would you also direct agencies to study the impact they would have on prices in the U.S.?
No, there's nothing to study. There's nothing to study. It's going to go well. The United States is going to become a very, very strong economically country. Yeah.
Mr. President, in the past you have spoken against BRICS. India is part of BRICS. Do you want to dismantle BRICS, or US want to be part of it?
I don't care, but BRICS was put there for a bad purpose, and most of those people they don't even want to talk about it now. They're afraid to talk about it because I told them if they want to play games with the dollar, then they're going to be hit with a 100% tariff the day they mention that they want to do it. And they will come back and say, we beg you not to do this. BRICS is dead since I mentioned that. BRICS died the minute I mentioned that. And I remember when Obama and Biden in particular, I guess he said that, they have us over a barrel. They don't have us over a barrel. We have them over a barrel. If BRICS wants to play games, those countries won't trade with us. We won't trade with them. And if any trading gets through, it'll be 100% tariff at least.
On your
What
cabinet,
would be
You know what? When they hear that, what do you think they're going to do? They're going to say, look what happened to BRICS. They didn't want to talk about it. They don't even want to admit that they were a member of BRICS. That's what's happened.
On your cabinet, sir, we saw Robert F. Kennedy Jr. get confirmed. He's going to come in here and be sworn in. Mitch McConnell has now voted against several of your nominees. He voted against RFK Jr.
Yeah,
as
Mitch,
the
what are you doing?
Secretary, citing conspiracy theories. What's your reaction to that?
Well, I feel sorry for Mitch. And I was one of the people that he wanted to go to the end and he wanted to stay leader. He's not equipped mentally. He wasn't equipped 10 years ago mentally, in my opinion. He'd let the Republican Party go to hell. If I didn't come along, the Republican Party wouldn't even exist right now. Mitch McConnell never really had it. He had an ability to raise money because of his position as leader, which anybody could do. You could do it even. And that's saying a lot. But the fact is that he raised money and he gave a lot of money to senators. And so he had a little loyalty based on the fact that as leader, you could raise a lot of money.
Oh, my.
Senators would call me and they say, he wants to give me 20, 25 million. Can I take it? I'd say, take the money. Take the money. But he engendered a certain amount of, I don't even call it loyalty. He, was able to get votes.
He owned people.
But I was the one that got him to drop out of the leadership position, so he can't love me. But he's not voting against Bobby. He's voting against me, but that's all right. He endorsed me. Mitch, do you know that Mitch endorsed me, right?
Well, he did
You
have
think that was
polio,
easy?
and
What?
He had polio, obviously, and his.
I don't know. I don't know anything about he had polio. He had polio.
Are you doubting that he had polio?
I have no idea if he had polio. All I can tell you about him is that he shouldn't have been leader. He knows that. He voted against Bobby. He votes against almost everything now. He's a very bitter guy, and we have a very strong party, and he's almost not even really a very powerful member. I'd say he's not he's lost his power, and it's affected his vote.
All right, more in a moment. President Trump, speaking frankly, he has definitely answered more questions in the short time he's been the 47th president than Biden did his entire presidency, right? Right? I saw Brian Stelter was out there saying, that's not true. Well, what's the data? Because it definitely seems like he's done a lot more already. All right, I think we're right at the end, actually, of President Trump's remarks. What's happening is they get taped, and then they're disseminated to the media. And then when you see them, they're a bit behind real time because it's tape. It's tape. But here's the president.
And, it's one of those things. But in the meantime, Bobby did great, got more votes than anybody thought. And I think he's going to do phenomenally, just phenomenally in that position. And everybody else likewise did well. Not only well, they got more votes than anybody thought. Tulsi, look at how she did. She did great. Marco got 99 votes. How about that? And Marco got 99 votes. And Marco, by the way, I have to tell you, Marco Rubio's done a fantastic job. He's been a great Secretary of State. They're all doing great. But we're going to have a swearing in today, and maybe we're going to have a second one because I hear we have a couple of them coming up. And the man behind me is doing a fantastic job.
Howard Lutnick.
Secretary of Commerce. And I think you're going to see something very big come from today's signing. This is going to be a very important signing. Okay?
U.S. Steel, sir, can I ask very quickly? You said you'd meet with the head of that company and the Japanese company.
U.S. Steel is going to be here, and a lot of the steel companies are coming. I think steel companies, they love what's happening to them. We saved it. If I didn't do the tariffs from my first term, you wouldn't have one steel company here. You wouldn't have one steel. There wouldn't be a steel company alive in the United States. And right now, they're going to be thriving. They're doing very well, but they're going to be thriving.
All right, big announcements from the Oval Office as usual. President Trump speaking to the press, taking a ton of questions, insulting reporters. It's Thursday. It's Thursday. Hey, coming up, we're going to talk about one of the president's nominees who is now confirmed, sworn in, the Director of National Intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard. Tony Shaffer, Lieutenant Colonel Tony Shaffer, reacts to that very important news just moments away on the Vince Coglianese Show. Hey, good afternoon to you. It's 3:35 here, News Talk 105.9 WMAL, where we're making sense of the news. Coming up 4:30, the great Larry O'Connor stops by. We'll talk to him about his important new book on the awful media. Nikki Neely will be with us at 5 o'clock. We talk about what's going on in education nationwide as Linda McMahon is set to become the next Secretary of Education. And then Gabriella Hoffman will be with us at 5:30. We talk chickens with her, backyard chickens, and why the government's making it so difficult to have those. You can join us, 888-630-9625, 888-630-WMAL. The breaking news this hour, RFK Jr. has just been sworn in as the new Secretary of HHS. This is a very powerful position for the nation's healthcare system, which is in desperate need of reform, given all of the corruption within our government. And the President Trump rightly saying this guy's the right guy for the job, getting him through the process. He was just sworn in by Supreme Court Justice Neil Gorsuch in the Oval Office, which is, of course, a scandal if you're the American left. It's a big scandal when a Supreme Court justice administers the oath of office, so I can't wait for all those stories. Or are they just reserved for the black guy? Do they just reserve those scandal stories for the black guy? I think they do. I think that's actually what they do because they're bigoted and they really hate Clarence Thomas for literally administering oaths of office. It really is crazy. Yeah, the left is angry. They're angry that that RFK, who was a Democrat up until like 4 minutes ago, is now running HHS. They're also mad that a former Democrat by the name of Tulsi Gabbard is now the Director of National Intelligence. For more on that story, I want to turn now to our guest, Tony Shaffer, Lieutenant Colonel Tony Shaffer, the president of the London Center for Policy Research and a CIA-trained former senior intelligence officer. Tony, good to have you back with us, sir.
Well, you're talking about crazy, so I'm sure that's why you brought me on. So there
yes.
You
go. We could talk about fitness. Are you gonna get into as good a shape as RFK Jr. at some point? Is that your plan?
Well, I challenged Pete Hegseth on X to a pull-up contest, and I don't want to. He texted me back, and I don't think he's like he's busy already doing things overseas right now. So I think I'm good for now. But Vince, we have to get together and pull up sometime since you're from Marine Corps heritage, so that should be in your genes to do pull-ups.
Yeah, well, I definitely need to get better. That's always one area I need to constantly improve. Tony Shaffer on Tulsi Gabbard. She's now the Director of National Intelligence. This seems like a very big deal and a very big break from the status quo. Am I right?
Oh, absolutely. Now, Tulsi, as you know, was targeted by certain people in the community, put her on the no-fly list. And think about this, Vince. A sitting lieutenant colonel who was in command of a unit was put on the no-fly list. And it was done, by all accounts, for political reasons. So I don't think there's anybody better than someone who's been directly wronged by the very community that's supposed to be protecting the American citizens to have witnessed and been a victim of the abuse herself. And plus, the other thing she's going to decided to politicize their service. Now, arguably, I'm a foreign intelligence officer. We've been friends a long time, and I try to instruct people based on my expertise without basically using it for political gain. I don't put letters out saying, gee, maybe, Biden was dangerous because of some intelligence predicate that I can't tell you about, but it's bad. And that's what the other side's been doing. They always imply somehow they know more than we do. And we always come to find out, no, it was a fake. With that said, I think Tulsi's going to go through, look at the ethics issues, look at the real intelligence, how that's handled, how that's processed, who, by the way, this is huge, gets security clearances, gets to come back in to be advising and assisting, because what we've seen, Vince, is those who come out of the intelligence business, become a member of a political party, they then start leveraging that inside access for political gain, and that's where the real danger comes.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen a lot of abuses at the hands of the intel community when it comes to domestic politics, interfering in our elections. And it looks like, priority one for Tulsi Gabbard is to, quote, end politicization of the intelligence community and ensure a clear mission focus to the intelligence community on its core mission of unbiased, apolitical collection and analysis of intelligence to secure our nation. So in other words, she wants the intelligence community to do the job it's supposed to be doing.
Absolutely. Now, I've had some experience in dealing with this during the 90s. I was working on an operation way off the books. It was only known by a handful of folks. And during the process of that operation, I learned that the Clinton administration wasn't being quite honest with the American people. Now, I had a dilemma. Do I just kind of go along and understand that there's a policy issue that I have to leave alone, or do I start leaking it to political operatives? Well, I didn't, because my job was to protect the system of intelligence and how it was collected, not try to take that information and use it as a political football. So there's got to be a line that you draw morally to say, yeah, even if I don't agree with the policy, my job is to protect the system to gain factual information that is important. And obviously, in the end, that information was used properly. People were able to make the right decisions. With that said, again, you have to have a system which is essentially apolitical as possible. You have to have men and women. Yeah. Some of my best friends I've served with were flaming libs, Vince, but they set aside our political differences to work for the good of the country. That's the spirit and the ethics we have to return to the intelligence community.
Well, you mentioned lying to the American people, and obviously one thing that the intelligence community should stop doing is trying to keep secrets from the American people that they deserve to know, for one, and then and stop deceiving them with a purpose of meddling in elections. But the other piece is lying to the President of the United States. That's a piece of this too. I'm reminded of when President Trump was in office, the intel community, for instance, was hiding from him the extent of our presence in Syria, that U.S. troop numbers in Syria. And that was done in order to deceive the sitting president of the United States. So Tulsi Gabbard has kind of a big task ahead of her in trying to get rid of that corruption.
Right. So I was part of that whole scheme because General Joseph Dunford got the guidance. He agreed we need to get troops out of there. As soon as Mark Milley comes in, I think we know who he is. He and the other members of the intelligence community conspired to essentially deceive the president. Now, Mike Flynn and I knew this was going to happen. I was just talking to Mike a few minutes ago. We're here at an event down in Florida. And one of the things, Vince, we had agreed upon, Mike and I, to go and sit down with President Trump shortly after they became, in the White House. Probably we're looking at April of 2017. We never made it because they went after Mike. But the idea was to sit down with President Trump and say, look, they're going to try to buffalo you. They're going to try to do things to hide all these things from you. And, oh, by the way, you have these authorities. Don't be afraid to use them. And I think that was part of the problem with the first administration. They got Mike Flynn out. They got people away from President who could tell them the truth, the whole and complete truth. And then they used that access or that layer to limit his ability to do his job, which is improper, illegal, and frankly, something.
All right. Can you still hear me?
Sure.
Okay, good. You broke up a little bit at the end there, but so let me ask then about the specifics of this role, the Director of National Intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard.
Sure.
The people have made a lot of hay out of this. Oh, she could bias the intelligence. She could deceive the president. This is the stuff that the groups that were cheering on the deceivers were telling us. But she is the conduit between the intelligence community and the president of the United States. What is she going to be able to do in that role, Tony Shaffer?
So she's basically the arbiter of what agency does what. She's basically sits on top. I think one of the first things she's going to do is cut the staff back. Right now, they have a staff as big as any intelligence agency. It was never designed to do that. It's supposed to be a small staff that directs other agencies to do their work. And she's going to be able to set up the priorities as well as the focus, which is, I would aptly say, has not been done adequately for the past 4 years at least. And then with that, she can help set budget priorities and actually go about setting up what information goes to the president. So in other words, she's the one who handles the information flow up and down the chain and also sets the priorities. So it's a very important job. While she has no budget authority directly, which is a thing, she can direct the agencies below her to set priorities based on their budget. So it's important. And I think something that she's going to be, as a former member of Congress, remember, she's a former member of Congress. She understands the process. I think she's going to be very well versed in doing that job.
Well, she's kind of done it all, hasn't she? She's been on the receiving end of abuse by the intel community, so she'll be on guard for the civil liberties violations. She's been a member of Congress, so she's familiar with what they have to handle in that capacity. And she's a member of the military. She's a veteran. She knows what it means to lose a soldier and the effect that has and the value of human life and what it means to be smart about how we use the people who volunteer to serve our country. And so, in other words, I think that she's conditioned to do this job wisely, Tony.
Right. And this is one of the departures from the past. Everybody that President Trump's picking, especially Tulsi, is a doer, someone who's actually been out in the trenches, done the hard work, been out in the field, actually experienced these things firsthand. Many of the folks who have been in these jobs were academics with little to no practical experience. And that's one of the things, Vince, we talked about on and off air. It was like having the high school debating team in charge of national security. Well, the high school debating team's been retired. Some of them are going to be indicted, just saying. And I think it's time for the adults in the room to be back in charge. And she's one of those adults.
Yeah, it'd be like a high school debating team, but far more sinister. You know, like James Clapper was the director of national intelligence. That guy was lying about the extent to which the government was spying on the American people. And I don't anticipate that Tulsi Gabbard is going to lie to us about what the government is doing to our own people.
No, especially Jim Clapper and several others, to include John Brennan, were all essentially glorified staff officers who were politically savvy. I'll say both Jim Clapper and John Brennan. They were brilliant bureaucrats who understood how to make themselves look good and act politically to get promoted. Jim Clapper is the poster child of acting politically. And I know Jim. I've worked with him. And I could tell you stories about some of the interactions I've had with him. And so everything he ever did was all about Jim Clapper and promoting himself to positions of authority. Same with John Brennan. So when you have that raw ambition without any intelligence to go with it, you see the wackadoodle policies and failures we've seen over and over again in the intelligence community.
Lastly, what do you make of Mitch McConnell here? He was the only Republican to vote against Tulsi Gabbard. He released a whiny statement saying that she can't be trusted in the role. What do you think of him?
Well, she can be trusted. She has been trusted. And I think this is indicative of the problems we've probably seen in the Senate, even when the Republicans had the majority. Just saying. I think there's some deeper issues there that go way back people should look at. So,
yeah, President Trump just unleashed on Mitch McConnell moments ago as well. He keeps voting against all these nominees. Sir, I'm always good to talk to you. Lieutenant Colonel Tony Shaffer, thank you for joining us today. Making a lot of news today from the Oval Office. RFK Jr. did just speak moments ago. Here's what he had to say.
I want to begin by thanking President Trump for giving me this extraordinary opportunity. And I want to introduce my family and thank them for being here. My wife, Cheryl, my cousin, Anthony Shriver, my daughter, Kik, my other daughter, Kira, Carolina Shriver,
Joey Schreiber, Jackson Hines, and Amaryllis Kennedy.
Lots of Kennedys in one room.
And I want to thank all of you for your support and throughout this whole 2.5-year journey. My first time in this Oval Office was in 1961, and I came here to meet, or 1962. I came here and I had a meeting with my uncle, who was president then, where we talked about the environment. He was involved deeply, as we all know, in restoring physical fitness to this country. He challenged at one point during his administration, he challenged Americans to do a 50-mile walk, which I ultimately did, but I remember the day that my father completed his walk. We were staying up at Camp David, and my father came in after 18 hours walking on the C&O towpath with his feet bleeding and blisters on them.
Wow.
My father had one of his best friends was Al Lowenstein. And Al Lowenstein ultimately was a congressman from New York who was assassinated himself in 1980. But Al Lowenstein had started the Dump Johnson movement to get rid of President Johnson and end the Vietnam War. And at the time that he started it, people just thought it was a fool's errand. And ultimately, he asked my father to run for president against Johnson. My father wouldn't do it at that time, and he asked Gene McCarthy. McCarthy did it, and he joined that campaign. And my father ultimately ran, and Johnson then dropped out. So Al Lowenstein succeeded. And although Al Lowenstein was on the other side now, running against my father with Gene McCarthy, my father wrote him a note, a quote from Emerson, where he said, if a single man plant himself firmly on his own ideal and there abide, the whole wide world will come around to him. For 20 years, I've gotten up every morning on my knees and prayed that God would put me in a position where I can end the childhood chronic disease epidemic in this country.
Amen.
On August 23rd of last year, God sent me President Trump. All right. And he gave me he's now given me, he's kept every promise that he's made to me. He's kept his word in every account and gone way beyond it. I'm so grateful to you, Mr. President. A lot of people told me that I couldn't trust President Trump. I better get it in writing. And we did a handshake, and everything that he told me he was going to do, he has done. Right. And I'm so grateful to him, and I've told you before, I genuinely believe that you are a pivotal historical figure, and you are going to transform this country at a time when we see all of the indicia of democracy now in tatters in our country. We see the rise of the military-industrial complex, the rise of totalitarianism, these attacks on our Constitution, and this breathtaking epidemic that is disabling our people.
Yep.
President Trump has promised to restore the American dream in this country. A healthy person has 1,000 dreams.
Yeah.
A sick person only has one.
All right, so a great commentary as RFK is now sworn in officially as HHS Secretary. His wife, Cheryl Hines, standing right behind him, so supportive. How crazy does this drive Larry David? This must drive him absolutely bonkers. It brings me joy because he's on an important mission. He says his prayers from God were answered. A lot of prayers were answered. A lot of prayers were answered. Coming up, the left is tried to conjure up another scandal for Elon Musk and President Trump. It face-planted in moments, I'll tell you how.